So you're planning a trip to Disney World, but you're feeling a bit overwhelmed? That's totally understandable, but don't worry, we've got you covered.
Today, we're going to guide you through some of the basics you're going to need to know to not only make your Disney vacation magical, but also stress-free.
And we'll be sharing one of the most important tips that could totally make or break your trip. So stick around to the end to find out.
Welcome to Just a Dream Away, your go-to for all things Disney. If you've got an upcoming Disney trip or you're just looking for a Disney fix, you're in the right place.
We'll help you plan every detail, from choosing the best time to visit to booking your hotel and park tickets, dining, and navigating the parks.
Plus, like we've said, we've got a game-changing tip that could totally transform your vacation. So with that, let's dive right in.
The first thing we're going to talk about is choosing the right time to go. There's so many factors about timing that you really have to consider when you're booking a Disney trip. Things like crowd levels, things like weather and special events, and these can all have a big impact on how enjoyable your trip is.
Yeah, so with that, there's a couple things that you want to think about. There's going to be peak season and then there's going to be off season. So depending on your level of comfort with being around a lot of people, I mean, let's face it, basically anytime you go to Disney, there's going to be a lot of people. But depending on the time of year or the season that you end up going, there's going to be maybe a lot more or maybe less people than you would find at other times. If you go during the season where everyone wants to go, well, Disney has higher prices at those times. So that's when you might want to consider going to like the off season, which would typically be like January-ish, different parts of January, September, typically when people go back to school, or kind of in the springtime after everyone gets done with their spring break around the beginning of May. Generally speaking, again, you're going to want to know when those high times are and when the low times are.
So like we mentioned, weather is also a huge consideration when planning your trip, because we all know that Florida gets hot and humid and muggy, but it has some quirky weather too. Like, you have to be prepared for afternoon showers pretty much year round. But if you're hoping to, take a trip in January and spend a bunch of time at the pool and go to the water parks, you might be in for a surprise because it can get kind of chilly. And you also have to think about, September is one of the off-season months that's great to go for low crowd times. The weather is usually really, really nice, but it's also prime hurricane season time.
Yeah.
So you really have to think about that. And especially if you're booking plane tickets and things like that, that's a huge thing to consider. If you're driving, it may not have quite as much of an impact, but trying to rebook a plane ticket at the last minute or getting stuck in Florida during a hurricane at the airport, nobody wants that.
Another thing to think about when you're trying to plan your trip and when you want to go is whether or not you want to be there during some of the special events. So we talked about how if you're wanting to avoid crowds, you may not want to be there during when Disney's putting on some of these special events like the holidays or whatnot, but maybe you do want to go during that time. Along with that, you also want to think about all the different festivals they have throughout the year at Epcot. They have the Festival of the Arts, and then they have the Flower and Garden, and then the Food and Wine Festival, and then they have the Festival of the Holidays. And each one is going to come with a variety of different things and offerings throughout the park, plus they have different food that they kind of have seasonally during those times, and it's a really good time and a lot of fun. But those are also some things that you want to be thinking about, that you may want to be there during that time, and you're going to want to know when those events are so that when you plan your trip, you're not going to miss out on those things.
The next thing we're going to talk about is setting your budget. Now, when you're planning a Disney trip, there are so many costs that you have to keep in mind just to make sure that nothing takes you by surprise. So obviously, you have to book a hotel, you have to get your park tickets, you have to eat, you want...
Well, I mean, I suppose you don't have to.
You don't have
but
to,
it's
but
probably
it's
advisable.
going to make it a lot more fun to go to the parks if you get to eat.
Plus, there's a lot of good food at Disney.
There is.
Don't listen to your Aunt Susan, who would tell you otherwise.
Yeah, no.
And if you have an Aunt Susan, we don't disparage Aunt Susan, but we're just saying, whoever that is.
Right.
Disney has a lot of good food and a lot of good options.
For sure.
But yeah.
But you also have to think about like having some extra money too, like for souvenirs. Like, we've all seen all the cute Disney merch, and like, you can tell yourself you're gonna go and you're not gonna buy anything, or you're only gonna buy something very teeny tiny that fits in your suitcase or whatever. And then you get there
Mm.
and you see 3 lounge flies that you love, or there's some huge Lego set that your kid is like gonna die over, and it's like, you gotta factor that in. Plus, one that you might not think about here is, okay, so you fly in to Orlando Airport, how are you getting to Disney? They took away Magical Express like in what, 2021 or something. That was a nice free service, but now everything is gonna be paid. So you have to figure out, are you gonna Uber? If you've got little kids in car seats, that's probably not the best option because you can't guarantee the car seat unless you brought it with you. Are you gonna take Mears Connect? What are you gonna do? So there's a lot of things that you have to figure out, all those different line items, and break down what they cost so you can really make sure that you're budgeting appropriately and that nothing takes you by surprise.
So the next thing we want to talk about when planning your Disney vacation is when you go to book your park tickets and hotel accommodations. So let's start with park tickets. First, a couple things that you want to think about is, how many days do you want to go to the park? You get a bigger discount the more days that you go, but then that's obviously more money. Like you save money by going longer, but you also have to spend more money than maybe what you intended if you are going to the park more often. So they give a discount for the longer you go, but like I said, it depends on how much money you're wanting to spend, and depending on how big your family is, that could really determine the length of time that you're going to spend in the parks.
Or even just how much you want to be at the parks. If you're somebody that likes to do a 1 day on, 1 day off kind of thing for the parks, and you're going to be there for a week, you don't need to buy a 6-day park ticket. You may only need a 3-day. You just have to take all of that into account.
You also wanted to figure out whether or not you want to go to multiple parks in a day, because they have the park hopper option that will allow you to go to any park, all 4 of the parks. But that is an extra cost that you're going to have to weigh when considering, how much you want to spend and what you want to do. One more thing we wanted to mention along with your park tickets. So not only do you have to determine how many park days that you want to go, or do you want park hopper or not, you also need to determine whether or not you want Disney's skip the line service. If you kind of know what you're doing, you don't necessarily have to get that service, but if this is like a once in a lifetime trip and you're already spending extra money to make sure that you're able to get exactly what you want, you might want to consider adding to your trip so that you're able to get done everything that you want to, because you do save a lot of time, and it could be worth it for you and your family if that's something that's important to you.
So along with booking park tickets, you also have to consider, where do you want to stay when you're at Disney World? There's so many different options. You can stay on property at a Disney resort, or you can stay off property at a non-Disney resort, or you can stay off property at a Disney affiliate resort. There's all kinds of options. But if you do choose to stay at a Disney resort, they have basically 3 tiers of resorts that you can stay at, and they're the value, moderate, and deluxe.
With all Disney resorts, the Disney-owned properties, you're going to get extra perks, like you can get into the park every day a half an hour early at any of the parks. With the deluxe resorts, you actually get to stay. They have what's called extra evening hours for people who are staying at those types of properties. So there are other perks for staying on property with Disney, and it's just super convenient. It's super well themed. I mean, they talk about the Disney bubble. You're totally immersed in everything when you're on property, and it's just a wonderful place like to be, and it really is truly magical. There's probably no better word for it. So
the next thing we want to talk about is creating a park itinerary. So Disney has 4 main theme parks. There's Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Animal Kingdom, and Hollywood Studios. And based on the group that you're going with, or your interests, different things like that may determine where you want to go. For the most quintessential Disney experience, and probably the most family friendly, is going to be Magic Kingdom. It's got the most rides, it just has the most going on, and if you're just looking for that like warm fuzzy Disney feeling, you're gonna find it at Magic Kingdom. So honestly, like we would say, if you've never been, spend your first day at Magic Kingdom. The next one would be Animal Kingdom, especially if you've got kids who are really interested in animals. Like, it's amazing. You can take them on the safari and you're just right there by these amazing giraffes and zebras, and it's so cool. Third one would be Epcot, which is really an interesting park. Like, I feel like you can't really put put a pin on what Epcot is. It's so unique because it has this whole like futuristic part of the park, but then it also has World Showcase where you have the different pavilions from these different countries that are so well themed and so immersive, and you've got food, you've got entertainment, you've got music, you've got all kinds of things from these different cultures.
Tons of offerings.
Yes, it's like it's a round the world trip that you can walk through in a day. And then the last park would be Hollywood Studios, which if you're a big Star Wars fan, this is where you want to go because this is where they have Galaxy's Edge. It's
Toy Story Land.
Toy Story Land, also huge. So it's a really fun park as well. I love the theme of Sunset Boulevard and just like the kind of vintage music that they play as you're walking down. You just feel like you're in old school Hollywood. It's so fun.
It is fun.
So there's really like, you can't go wrong with any of the parks, but you just have to kind of know a little bit about what each one offers, where the rides are that you really want to ride, and make sure that you're planning those park days.
Yeah, and along with that, one other thing, a tip that we would also encourage you to consider, depending on who you're traveling with. If you've got different generations, young and old, not everyone's going to be able to go at the same speed. Not everyone's going to be able to go at the same pace,
or even ride the same rides.
Right.
If you've got little ones.
That's right. There are some height requirements for certain rides. So those are all things that you want to be thinking about. And the nice thing is, in my Disney experience, you can actually filter some of those things to find out which ones have the ride requirements. Again, you can look on that app to see everything that they offer with the different entertainment offerings and then the attractions and whatever else. But the one thing that we wanted to share is that when you're going through and creating your park itinerary, you want to also maybe factor in whether or not your group is going to need a break here and there.
Right. So not only choosing which parks you want to go to, but also choosing deciding who wants to ride which rides and who wants to just go take a break and we'll meet up again later. Making sure that you're having those conversations and communicating well, because everybody wants to enjoy their trip, but that looks different for everybody.
Right. Okay, the next thing we want to just briefly talk about is planning your dining, or thinking about, your food options at Walt Disney World. You have a couple different tiers of dining at Disney. You have the quick service, you have the table service, or signature dining. Signature dining is going to be the most expensive. It's typically fancier. With table service or signature dining, you're not actually probably going to be able to get in unless you have an advanced dining reservation. And typically when you're planning your trip, you can start booking those 60 days out from when your trip takes place. So you need to be aware of that, because those reservations sometimes, depending on the time of year, can go very quickly. Sometimes just not really having anything planned specifically and just trying to go through and get dining, whether quick service or walk-up wait list, could be a good option for you. They also, with that, have mobile ordering. Yes, thank you. Mobile ordering, where you can get on the app, and if you see that they have that available at that particular restaurant, typically I think it's quick service, but you can go on and you can mobile order ahead of time, or you can pick a time specifically, and you want to try to do that earlier in the day because those times can fill up. They do at different times have walk-up wait lists that if you are wanting to try to get in a place you don't have a reservation for, you can try to see if you can get on their wait list and if they have any availability at that particular time. But if you can't do that or don't want to do that, there are plenty of other options. Those are just a couple things you want to be thinking about so you're ready and prepared for that part of your trip.
So the next thing we want to talk about is the must-see attractions. Now, this is going to be different for everybody because, again, it goes back to what's important for you and your family or your party. You just have to figure out what are the things that you want to prioritize doing. For some people, that's going to be, I want to do all the thrill rides. And for other people, they want to do all the character meet and greets. They're both equally valid. You just have to make sure that you're on the same page with everybody else in your group. So just making sure that you know what your must-see attractions are at each park, you can work that into the schedule well.
Yeah, we've actually taken a trip at one point where we had another couple with us, and they were friends of ours, and there was a little bit of miscommunication and maybe a little frustration about some things, but we worked it out and it was all fine in the end. But you want to try to avoid that at all costs. So just make sure that everybody's on the same page, and you at least let it be known, kind of what you're wanting to do and what they're wanting to do. And so you can try to find a compromise and work it out amongst yourselves so that it just saves you a lot of headache.
Remember, we're planning a magical and stress-free vacation.
That's right.
Having these conversations ahead of time removes the stress.
Most of the time.
Mostly.
Yeah. The number one tip that we can recommend to you is to manage your expectations.
Yeah, you just really have to stay flexible because there's so many things. Like you can plan your trip down to the minutest little detail, but there's so many things that are out of your control. You just have to be willing to just flex and work with it, because if you just spend your whole time kind of begrudging the things that went wrong from your plan, it's going to ruin your trip. But if you just embrace it and roll with it, maybe you'll have a better time than what you even planned on.
We actually had that happen to us where we were looking so forward to going to the pool, and it was sunshiny all day, and our kids were smaller and they needed naps, and they woke up from their nap, and then as soon as we went to go down to the pool, they closed the pool because of lightning in the area, and that was not what we were expecting.
I had not managed my expectations to realize that, hey, we're in Florida. It can storm any old time, and especially in the afternoon. And I needed to just be more flexible and realize, okay, it might not happen, but that's okay, because we're at a beautiful place, we're at Disney, and we can go do something else that's super fun. It's not like we have to be confined to our room just because our plans change.
There's tons of stuff in the resort activities that they have. They have poolside activities, again, if it's not thundering and lightning out. But another bonus tip with that, just as a side here, typically if you go in the mornings, you have a better chance of not being rained out, or or kind of maybe later in the day, but typically
and you
in the morning.
avoid that peak sun exposure time, so you're less likely to get burned, which is also a big plus.
Yeah, but like she said, there's tons of things to do. Again, if you're looking for something, some of the resorts have community halls. They have different games and activities that you can do with other guests or with the different cast members, or there's just tons of stuff. And just understanding that you may have had this amazing plan and you could have had everything perfect, but with that, just go into it thinking that if it doesn't happen exactly the way you want, you can still have a great time, and like she said, even a better time if you just kind of manage your expectations.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. Obviously, there's a lot more that could be said about everything that goes into planning a Walt Disney World or a Disneyland trip. In fact, if you want help planning your trip, I'm actually a certified travel agent that specializes in Disney vacations. I would love to help you out and try to do all the legwork for you, because again, there's a lot that goes into it. So if you want more information about that, you can contact us at contact.justadreamaway@gmail.com.
And we'll have that linked down in the description below as well. And if you'd like to hear about one of our trips that we planned that almost didn't happen, check out this video.